Careful with that, new girl. Those plates bite back. Maybe start with the pink ones by the mirror. The voice carried across the empty gym at 5 in the morning, loud the way young men are loud when they want an audience. Cole Maddox stood by the squat racks with a towel around his neck, 19 years old, and certain of everything. 2 recruits beside him laughed on cue. The woman on the lifting platform did not look up. She finished the rep. Bar to the floor, controlled, the plate settling with a single clean note instead of a crash. She stepped back, breathed once, and let the silence sit where his joke had been. The base gym was cold at that hour. Rubber floor, chalk dust, the low electric hum of lights that never quite turned off. High windows along the east wall held the first blue of dawn. The recruit depot outside was still asleep, the squad bays dark, the parade deck empty. In here, there were 4 people and a great deal of iron. She was somewhere in her late 30s, dark hair pulled back tight, a plain gray shirt and track pants with no markings of any kind. No rank, no unit, no name tape, because there was nothing to put one on. To a recruit 2 weeks from graduating, she was exactly what Maddox had decided she was. A civilian. A new girl who had wandered into the wrong building. She moved to the dumbbell rack, picked a pair, weighed them in her hands a half second, and began slow curls, elbows pinned, no swing, no momentum. As her left forearm turned upward, a small dark tattoo showed on the inside of her wrist. Half a heartbeat. Then it was gone again under the next rep. She had come to the depot 2 days early. There was no order that required it, and no one who expected it. She had simply finished out-processing her last command on a Wednesday, signed for her quarters on a Thursday, and found by Friday morning that she could not sit still in an empty room with 2 days of nothing in front of her. So she had done what she always did with a body that would not rest. She had found the iron. The gym was the one building on any base that felt the same everywhere, in any country, in any decade. And at 5 in the morning it was empty, and empty was what she had wanted. She had not counted on company. She had been spoken to in worse rooms than this. The trick was the same everywhere. You let it pass through you the way water passes through a screen. You kept your hands busy and your face quiet, and you let the loud man spend himself. She had learned the trick young, and she had refined it across 18 years and 4 deployments, and more rooms full of certain men than she could count, and by now it was not even effort. It was just weather. You did not argue with weather. You dressed for it, and you went on. What she did not do, what she would never do, was perform. She did not glare. She did not explain. She did not tell 3 boys at 5 in the morning that she had carried 2 Marines 1,100 meters across broken ground, while the world came apart around her. None of that belonged in a gym. So she curled the weights to a tempo a metronome would have envied, and she counted exits without thinking about it, 3 of them. And she clocked the 3 young men the way she clocked everything, by instinct, before she ever touched the iron. I'm just saying. Maddox was warming up now, playing to his 2-man crowd. He called her ma'am like it was the punchline of a joke only he found funny. He suggested, to general laughter, that the new girl had probably been looking for the yoga room and gotten turned around. He was not cruel, exactly. He was 19 and undefeated in this particular room, and he had mistaken being undefeated for being right. Across the floor, a 4th person had stopped moving. Master Sergeant Elias Tron was 44 and built like a man who had spent 20 years deciding that comfort was optional. He was a chief drill instructor on this depot, which meant he had seen 10,000 recruits come through these doors, loud, and leave quiet. He had re-racked his own bar a minute ago and turned to grab water, and somewhere in that turn, his eyes had snagged on the woman at the dumbbell rack and refused to let go. It wasn't the noise that held him. He had long ago stopped hearing recruits be loud. It was her hands, the economy of them, the way nothing she did was wasted, the way the weight went exactly where she wanted and never an inch farther, the way her balance never shifted no matter what her arms were doing. He had known a small number of people who moved like that. He could count them. Most of them were dead. He filed it and said nothing. That was the discipline of his job and of his years. You did not move on a feeling. You watched, and you let the picture finish drawing itself. Maddox finished his bit and grinned at his audience. Sure, he had won the room. He had decided the morning was his. The gym was his. The story he would tell at Chow was his. He flexed once at the mirror and reached for his water, pleased. He did not notice the man in the corner. He did not notice that Master Sergeant Tran had gone very still, the bottle forgotten in his hand, staring at the inside of a stranger's wrist, as though it were a face he half remembered from a photograph he had not let himself look at in years. The woman set the dumbbells down without a sound and reached for the chalk. Outside, the sky kept lightening. Inside, 3 recruits laughed at a joke, and one master sergeant tried to place a tattoo he could not yet name, and the new girl who was not a new girl rolled her shoulders once and got back to work. The morning had not started going wrong for Cole Maddox yet, but it had started. She chalked her hands and stepped back onto the platform, and the day went on the way she wanted it to. Quietly. For now. Maddox decided the only thing better than mocking the new girl was beating her at something, and he picked the thing he never lost at. Pull-up bar. He slapped the cold steel of it. Open challenge. Anybody in this building. I'll out-rep the whole room. He looked straight at her. Even you, ma'am. Come on. Show us what the new girl's got. She looked at the bar, then at him. One word. Sure. That was all. Not a speech, not a smirk, just the word, dropped flat. And somehow the flatness of it bothered Maddox more than any comeback would have. He covered the bother with bravado. He jumped up, gripped the bar, and ripped through his set the way 19-year-olds do, fast and furious and full of swing, hips kicking, chin clawing over the bar. He got to 19 before his arms quit, dropped down breathing hard, and turned with both hands raised like he'd already won. 19. He wiped his palms. Beat that. And no half reps, ma'am. Full range or it doesn't count. He grinned. He had added the rule on purpose, certain it would be the thing that buried her. She stepped up, set her grip, and hung. Then she went. There was no swing in it, no kick, no claw, no theater. She pulled herself up until her collarbone touched the bar, lowered until her arms locked out completely, and did it again, and again, at a tempo that did not change. 1, 2, 3. The recruit stopped talking somewhere around 8, because by 8 it was obvious this was a different kind of thing entirely. Her breathing stayed even. Her face stayed quiet. The only sound was the soft creak of the bar and the small controlled exhale at the top of each rep. Numbers do not care who is comfortable. 12, 15, 18. She passed his 19 without any acknowledgement that 19 had ever mattered, the way you walk past a mile marker on a road you have driven 100 times. 20, 22. She stopped at 25, clean, every rep identical to the first, and lowered herself to the floor, with her feet landing soft and her weight already centered. No stagger, nothing to recover from. 25, to his 19. And she was not even breathing hard. Whitlock, the quieter of Maddox's 2 friends, had stopped laughing. The math of it bothered him in a way he could not put down. 19 ragged reps with full-body English against 25 metronome reps with none. That was not a close thing. That was not a thing where you could tell yourself the new girl had gotten lucky. Maddox felt the room move and scrambled to hold it. Yeah, well, he laughed, too loud. Doesn't count without weight. Anybody can do bodyweight stuff. Put some plates on and we'll see. Nobody laughed with him this time. The other recruit looked at the floor. It was a small thing. That silence. But Reyes noticed it the way she noticed everything. The crowd had a temperature, and the temperature had just dropped a degree. A minute ago they had been Maddox's. Now half of them were not sure whose they were, and the unsureness showed in the way they had stopped looking at him and started looking at her. Quick glances they thought she could not see. She could see all of them. She had spent her whole adult life reading rooms full of young men, learning which way they would break before they knew themselves, and this room was beginning to break the way they always did, when the loud one's story stopped matching what their own eyes were telling them. She did not press it. Pressing was a mistake. You let the room arrive on its own, and it always did. Across the gym, Master Sergeant Tron had not moved. He had watched her drop from the bar, watched the landing, the centered weight, the total absence of strain, and he had felt the last of his doubt go cold and quiet inside him. He knew that landing. He knew that economy. You did not learn it in a gym. You learned it in places where moving wrong got you killed, and you kept it for the rest of your life, whether you wanted to or not. And when she had reached up for the bar, the inside of her left wrist had turned toward him for one full second, and he had seen the ink clearly for the first time. A small, dark design, an eagle, a globe, an anchor, worn down to its essentials, and beneath it a thin dagger, and beneath that a date. Not a decorative tattoo. Not the kind a kid gets on leave. A unit mark. The kind a very specific group of people wore, and only after a very specific thing had happened to them. His jaw tightened. His pulse, which 20 years of this work had taught to stay slow, picked up half a step. He had seen that ink before. He had seen it in a battalion he had supported a long time ago, on the wrists of men who came back from a fight in the autumn and were never quite the same. He had heard the story of that fight, told in low voices for years afterward. A corner that should have fallen and did not. A sergeant who crossed an open fire lane twice, a name that came up every time, spoken with the kind of respect Marines do not spend lightly. He looked at the woman chalking her hands at the dumbbell rack, calm as still water, while a 19-year-old tried to claw back a room he had already lost. And Master Sergeant Elias Tran began, slowly, to understand exactly who had walked into his gym. He did not say anything yet, but he set his water down, and he started, without hurry, to close the distance. Maddox, sensing his audience slipping, did the thing that scared boys do when they are losing. He got meaner. He could not beat her at the bar, so he stopped trying to beat her and started trying to bury her. More recruits had begun trickling in by now, the early crowd, 6 or 7 of them stowing bags and pulling on gloves, and Maddox played to the bigger room like a man who had found a microphone. "You should have seen it," he announced, loud, to a kid who had just walked in and seen nothing. "The new girl over here thinks she's hard. Came in like she owns the place." He spun the morning into a story, and in the story he was generous and amused, and she was a joke, and a couple of the newcomers who had not watched her do 25 clean pull-ups gave him the cheap laugh he was fishing for. Whitlock shifted, uncomfortable. "Cole, leave it. I'm not doing anything." Maddox spread his hands, all innocence. "Just saying hi to the new girl." He grinned. The bit was his now, and he was not going to let a little thing like having lost give it up. Reyes read the room without appearing to look at it. She knew which of the young men were enjoying this, and which had gone quiet, and which, like Whitlock, were starting to feel the first cold edge of something being wrong. She had spent her whole life in rooms full of men deciding what she was. She knew the weather of it better than they did. So she did what she always did. She kept her routine exactly on tempo. She refused, completely, to give him the reaction the whole performance was built to extract. She did not get angry. She did not get hurt. She did not get loud. She wiped down the bar she had used, re-racked the dumbbells in their proper slots, and moved to the next thing on her own program as though the gym contained no one but her. Dignity, she had learned a long time ago, in a place she did not talk about, was not the absence of insult. You could not control whether men insulted you. Dignity was what you did with your hands while it happened. It was keeping your tempo. It was racking the weight clean. It was refusing to become, even for a second, the small thing someone needed you to be so that they could feel large. It was the hardest discipline she owned, harder than any of the lifts, harder than the crossings had been. Anyone could be loud back. Anyone could put a recruit in his place at 5 in the morning with a few sharp words and the truth of a rank he could not see. The hard thing, the thing almost no one could do, was to need none of it. To stand in the middle of a room built entirely to make you smaller and decline, completely, to get smaller. To let a foolish boy be foolish and to keep your own tempo while he did it. She had paid for that discipline in a currency Maddox could not imagine, and she was not about to spend it now on him. Tran, 10 feet away now and closing, almost stepped in. The instinct to shut Maddox down was strong, the reflex of a man who had spent 2 decades correcting young Marines who forgot themselves. But he held off because something in the way she was handling it told him, clearly, that she did not need him to. She was not enduring this. She was managing it, the way you manage weather, with the patience of someone who knows the storm will exhaust itself long before she does. And he was sure now, not almost sure. Sure. He had seen that ink in a photograph once, in a write-up he had read more than once, in the citation that went with a medal that fewer than 100 living people in the entire Marine Corps were authorized to wear. He pulled his phone from his pocket, thumbed to something, looked at it, then at her wrist, then at it again. The whole early crew was laughing now, the way crowds laugh when one confident person tells them what is funny. Everyone in the gym was laughing, everyone except the woman at the center of it, who was calmly loading a barbell, and the one master sergeant in the corner who had gone pale and who was looking at his phone like a man reading the name on a headstone he did not expect to find. If this story is getting under your skin the way it should, take 1 second and subscribe to Honor Tales. It costs you nothing, and it tells these stories they are worth telling. Now stay with me, because the recruit is about to make his mistake bigger. Maddox, riding the crowd, made the assumption load-bearing. He had decided she was a civilian, and now he built on it. He walked toward the platform with the easy ownership of a kid who had never been told no in this building, and he gestured at the iron around them like a landlord. "Look, ma'am, I'll be straight with you." His tone was almost kind, which was somehow worse. "This gym's really for the recruits cycling through. We've got a schedule. The cadre runs us hard. We need the platforms. So maybe clear off this one and let people who actually train here get to work." No offense. No offense. He genuinely believed it. That was the strange thing about Cole Maddox at 5 in the morning. He was not a villain. He was certain. He had a picture of the world in his head, and the picture said, recruits trained here and lost civilians did not, and he could not see the woman in front of him at all, only the picture. That was the part that would be hardest to explain to him later, when there was a later. He had not hated her. Hate would have required him to see her, and he had not seen her once, not in the whole hour. He had seen a category, a new girl, a civilian, a problem to be managed off his platform with a few well-aimed jokes and the easy authority of a kid who had been told for 10 weeks that he was the best in his platoon and had decided to believe it all the way down. Certainty was a more dangerous thing than cruelty, Reyes had learned. Cruelty knew it was doing something. Certainty thought it was just describing the world. Rhea set down the plate she was holding. She looked at him, even and unbothered, and asked one question. "Who runs the Final Phase series?" It was phrased lightly, but there was something underneath it. A precision, a flatness, the sound of someone who already knew the answer and was checking whether he did. The vocabulary was exact. Final Phase series. Not the words a lost civilian uses. Maddox missed it completely. "Senior drill instructor handles us day to day. Master Sergeant's the chief. Sergeant Major runs the whole depot," he recited, the way you recite to someone who clearly does not understand how things work. "It's a whole structure. It's kind of a lot. You probably don't need to worry about it." "No." She picked the plate back up. "Probably not." She squared her stance, set the plate on the bar, and the contrast hit the room sideways, her calm against his volume, her stillness against his fidget. The longer it went, the more wrong his confidence started to look. Like a man shouting directions in a building he does not realize the quiet woman beside him designed. He had spent 20 years learning that the loudest person in any room was almost never the most dangerous one. Tran knew it in his bones. He had watched it play out 100 times, in motor pools and mess halls and on flight lines. The young man certain and loud, the quiet one in the corner who turned out to be the one you should have been watching all along. He had the citation open on his phone now. He had read the name. He had read the date. He looked at the date inked on her wrist and the date on the screen. And they were the same date. And his stomach dropped the way it had not dropped in years. Maddox, oblivious, pointed at the door. "Seriously, though, why don't you go find the civilian gym on the other side of base? This one's ours." And behind him, unhurried and certain, Master Sergeant Elias Tran was already crossing the floor. Tran reached the platform and did not blow it open. He could have. He could have called the room to attention and announced what he knew and watched a 19-year-old's life cave in. The old version of him, the one fresh off the drill field, might have. But years had taught him that the truth lands harder when you let it arrive on its own feet. So he stepped between Maddox and the woman, not aggressive, just present. A wall where a moment ago there had been open floor. He looked at the ink, then at her face. That tattoo. His voice was low, pitched for her and not the room. 2nd Battalion, the November fight, the corner that didn't fall. The woman met his eyes. For the first time all morning, something passed between two people in that gym that the recruits could not read. "Yes," she said. One word. But Tran heard everything in it. Confirmation, and the weight behind the confirmation, and the particular flatness of a person who has been asked about the worst day of her life by a stranger and answered honestly because he had earned the question. His whole posture changed. The watcher recalibrated in real time, the way a man straightens without meaning to when the truth of a thing finally lands on him. He turned to Maddox, and his voice was still low, still controlled, but there was iron under it now. "Recruit, secure your comments. Go finish your workout somewhere else." A beat. "I'm telling you that as a favor. Take it." It was not a threat. It was the opposite of a threat. It was a man holding a door open and quietly begging a boy to walk through it before it closed. Maddox did not get it. Of course he did not. He was 19, and the morning had been his, and now a master sergeant was taking the new girl's side, and the unfairness of that lit him up. "You taking her side, Master Sergeant?" He laughed, but it cracked at the edges. "Over a recruit? Come on, what is she, your friend?" The room tightened. Some animal part of the crowd felt the floor shift, even though their minds had not caught up. Whitlock had gone white. He had been doing his own math the whole time. The pull-ups, the landing, the calm, the way the chief drill instructor was speaking to a civilian like she was something else entirely. And the math had arrived somewhere terrible. He grabbed Maddox's sleeve. "Cole, stop. Stop talking." Maddox shook him off. Reyes still had not raised her voice. She stood on the platform with her hands chalked and her weight centered and let the scene unspool, because she did not need to win the room. The room was about to lose itself, and there was nothing she had to do to make that happen, except keep standing exactly as still as she was standing. Tran looked at Maddox for a long moment, weighing him, deciding how much of what was coming the kid had earned and how much he could still be spared. Then he said 6 words, quiet, final. "You have no idea who that is." And for the first time that morning, Cole Maddox stopped smiling. Something in the master sergeant's face had reached him at last, under the bravado, under the certainty, down to the place where 19-year-olds keep the fear they pretend they don't have. He looked at the woman on the platform, really looked, maybe for the first time, at the calm, at the ink, at the way 2 senior Marines' worth of instinct was bending around her like light around something heavy. "What's that supposed to mean?" he said. But the swagger had gone out of it. Tran didn't answer. He just held the boy's eyes and let the silence do what silence does. What does the ink on her wrist actually mean? To understand the rest of this morning, you have to leave the gym. You have to go back 15 years, to a corner of the world that almost took her, and to the friend who didn't come home. If you believe a story like hers deserves to be told, subscribe before we go there. Then come with me. Autumn, 2011. A contested district in the South, where the air smelled of dust and diesel, and the heat sat on everything like a hand. Sergeant Marisol Reyes was 23 years old. A rifleman, 5 years in, holding the corner of a compound with a squad that had walked into the wrong street at the wrong hour. The ambush opened from 3 sides at once, the way the bad ones do, and in the first 30 seconds, the patrol went from a patrol to a collection of people trying very hard not to die. 2 Marines went down in the open. The fire lane between the squad and the wounded was 1,100 meters of broken ground, raked from both ends, and the rule of that lane, the iron rule, was that you didn't cross it. Crossing it was how the 2 down had become 2 down. She crossed it anyway. She did not remember deciding to. That was the part she never could explain afterward, to the board, to the men who pinned the medal on her, to herself in the long nights that came later. There had been no decision. There had been a boy named Hector Marin, face down in the dirt 40 meters away, her friend since the depot, the one who covered her chow when she was broke and showed her pictures of his sister's kids, and her body had simply gone and gotten him. She crossed the lane. She dragged him to cover, his weight all wrong, the world cracking the air apart around them both. Then she went back. There was another Marine, younger, screaming, and she crossed the lane a second time and brought him to. And how neither crossing killed her was a question she stopped asking because there was no answer that helped. The men who wrote the citation later would use words like conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of her life above and beyond the call of duty. And the words were true, and the words meant nothing, because they were not words she would have used. What she remembered was smaller than the words, and larger than them at the same time. The grit in her teeth, the weight of Marin's plate carrier in her hands, the exact sound the air made, which was not like the movies, which was nothing like anything, which was a sound she still heard sometimes in the half-second before sleep. She remembered counting. 43 rounds left, then 31, then 19. She remembered the way the count had organized the chaos into something her body could move through, the way a metronome organizes a storm of notes into music. She had not been brave the way people meant when they said the word. She had been precise. She had simply refused, with everything she had, to waste a single motion, because wasting one might mean wasting the only one that mattered. And that economy, that refusal, was the thing that had kept her alive on a day that had no business letting her live. Then she held the corner. The squad had to consolidate, had to get the casualties stable and the radio up, and someone had to keep the corner from falling while they did. And that someone was her. 40 minutes. She held it for 40 minutes, alone for stretches of it. Her economy of motion already there, already forged. Every round and every movement counted, because counting was the difference between living and not. The corner did not fall, but Hector Marin did not come home. He had been alive when she dragged him in. He was not alive when the bird lifted off. The space between those two facts was a country she would live in, quietly, for the rest of her life. She had crossed an open fire lane twice and held a corner for 40 minutes and earned the second highest award the nation gives for valor in combat, and none of it had been enough to keep a 19-year-old from a town she'd never heard of from dying in her arms. He had been the same age as the recruits in her gym would be. 19. She thought about that sometimes, the symmetry of it, the way the Marine Corps kept handing her 19-year-olds to keep alive, the way she would spend the rest of her career standing in front of boys exactly as young and exactly as certain as the one she had not been able to bring home. Marin had shown her the pictures the night before, in the dark, on a cracked phone screen. His sister's 2 kids in a paddling pool, laughing. He had a whole life waiting in those pictures. He was going to be an uncle who took them fishing. He had told her so, grinning, and she had told him to put the phone away and get some sleep. And that was the last full conversation they ever had. And she would have given the medal and the rank and every clean rep of the 18 years since to have said something better. People thought the ink was about being hard. They saw the design and the date and assumed it marked something she was proud of. It did not work like that. The ink was about a boy named Marin. Years later, the survivors of that corner had gotten it together. The same small mark on the same inside wrist, the eagle and the globe and the anchor worn down to bone, the dagger and the date. The date was not the date of the medal. The date was the day Marin died. The Navy Cross lived in a drawer. The ink lived on her wrist, where she would see it every time she turned her hand over, every time she lifted a weight, every time she shook a hand, for the rest of her life. A name, a debt that never closes. And back in the present, in a warm, bright gym at 5 in the morning, a recruit who had never crossed anything worse than a finish line had just laughed at it. Back in the gym, Maddox could not stand still in the wrongness of the moment, and he did the one stupid thing that ended the game. He needed to save face. The crowd had turned. The master sergeant had warned him. The new girl would not break, and a cornered boy reaches for the cheapest move on the board. He stepped to the platform, and before Tran could get between them again, he grabbed her left forearm and turned the wrist up for everyone to see. "Let's all see it then." His voice was too bright, too loud, the sound of someone covering panic with volume. "The scary tattoo the master sergeant's so worked up about. Come on, what is it?" It was not violence. He did not hurt her. He flicked the wrist up the way you'd flip a card on a table, a small, stupid, immature thing. But it was a hand laid on her without leave, and the room knew it. The laughing stopped all at once, like a switch had been thrown. Even the recruits who had been on his side went quiet, because there are lines that a room feels before a mind can name them. And Cole Maddox had just put his hand across one. Reyes did not pull away. That was the thing none of them expected. She let him hold the wrist. She let him turn it up. She let the whole room see the ink, the eagle and the globe, and the anchor and the dagger and the date, because he had asked to see it, and she had decided, in that exact instant, that he would. Her stillness was total, not frozen, chosen. And then she looked up at him, and she smiled. It was the first time her face had changed all morning. Not a warm smile, not a cruel one either. Something calm and almost kind, and absolutely certain. The smile of a person who has just watched the last domino she needed fall exactly where she knew it would. He had wanted everyone to look at the tattoo. Now everyone would. That was the one wish of his that she fully intended to grant. Tran moved then, fast, and took Maddox's hand off her arm, not gently, his own voice flat as a blade. Hands off. Now. Whitlock physically stepped back from Maddox, putting space between himself and what was about to happen, the social tide turning in a single visible motion, the crowd peeling away from the boy at its center. And at the far door of the gym, drawn by the sudden silence, the way old soldiers are always drawn to a room that has gone wrong, a big man in camis had stopped and was taking in the scene with hard, careful eyes. Sergeant Major Hollis Beckett, 49, the senior enlisted Marine on the entire depot, did not yet know what he was looking at. But he knew silence like this meant something, and he started toward it. Maddox stood frozen, his hand still half raised where Tran had knocked it away, staring at a smiling woman and a furious master sergeant and a sergeant major crossing the floor toward him. And somewhere in his chest, the bottom began, very slowly, to fall out. The reveal came quietly. That was the part Maddox would remember for the rest of his life, later, when he understood it. Nobody screamed. There was no formation, no whistle, no call sign barked across a parade deck, no wall of Marines snapping to attention on command. There was just a master sergeant, speaking plainly, in a room gone so silent you could hear the lights. Tran turned to the recruits. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. "That ink," he said, "is worn by the Marines who survived the November fight. 2nd Battalion. The corner that didn't fall." He let it sit. The woman wearing it crossed an open fire lane twice to drag 2 Marines to cover, then held that corner for 40 minutes. She was awarded the Navy Cross for it. There are fewer than 100 living Marines authorized to wear that decoration. The recruits went absolutely still. Some of them did not fully understand yet, but they understood enough. They understood the number. They understood the words Navy Cross, even if they had only ever heard them in a classroom. They understood that the new girl wasn't a new girl, and that the morning had been a catastrophe whose size they were only beginning to see. Sergeant Major Beckett reached the platform. He looked at the woman, and recognition moved across his face. And then something close to a smile, dry and surprised. He came to a respectful stop in front of her. "Gunnery Sergeant Reyes." He shook his head slowly. "You're 2 days early." "Sergeant Major," her voice was even. "Couldn't sleep." Beckett turned to the room, and his voice carried the way a sergeant major's voice carries without ever seeming to try. "For those of you doing the math, this is Gunnery Sergeant Reyes. As of Monday, she is your senior drill instructor for final phase." He let his eyes pass over the crowd and land, at last, on Maddox. "She is going to be running your lives until you graduate. I would start that relationship over, if I were you." And Cole Maddox's face went through it all, right there, in front of everyone. Confusion first, the brief animal hope that this was a joke, that the words did not mean what they obviously meant. Then disbelief, as the hope died, as the pull-ups and the landing and the calm and the ink all clicked into a single picture he could no longer unsee. Then recognition, full and total. The understanding of exactly who he had spent the last hour mocking. And then horror, pure and cold, as he grasped that the woman he had called a lost civilian, the woman he had told to clear off and find the yoga room, the woman whose wrist he had grabbed to make a joke, was a Navy Cross recipient and his next senior drill instructor. Whitlock had come to attention without being told. So had two others. They stood there, eyes front, the way you stand when a part of you understands that standing correctly is the only apology your body knows how to make. There is a particular silence that falls in a room when everyone in it realizes at the same moment that they have badly misjudged something. It is not embarrassment, exactly. It is bigger than embarrassment and quieter than fear. It is the sound of a whole crowd recalibrating its picture of the world all at once, and it filled the gym now, wall to wall, broken only by the hum of the lights and the small, ragged breathing of a 19-year-old who had just understood what he had done. Every recruit in that room would carry this minute with them. They would tell it years from now to other Marines in other gyms. They would say, "I was there the morning Maddox found out who the new girl was." And every one of them, telling it, would stand a little straighter, because the lesson of it was not really about Maddox at all. The lesson was that you never knew. You never, ever knew who was standing quietly at the edge of your room, carrying what they carried, and the only safe way to live was to treat all of them as though they might be her. Reyes finally spoke more than a single word. She looked at Maddox, calm, quiet, no triumph in it at all. "Let go of my wrist." He already had, minutes ago, but she said it anyway, and they both knew why. And remember exactly how this felt. Every part of it. She did not raise her voice. She never had to. The room had already done the math, and the answer was written on every face in it. Outside, the sun had cleared the buildings, and the depot was waking up, and a recruit named Cole Maddox stood in a bright gym understanding that the worst morning of his life had only just begun. The reckoning was not what anyone in the room expected, and that was the whole point of it. Sergeant Major Beckett stepped close to Reyes and lowered his voice, the practical machinery of consequence already turning in him. "Gunnery Sergeant, say the word and I'll have him dropped. Disrespect, hands on a senior Marine. I can make this recruit's morning his last one on this depot. Charge sheet's the easy part." He meant it. It was within his power, and arguably within his duty. Reyes watched Maddox across the floor, where the boy stood rigid and gray, waiting to learn how much of his future he had just thrown away. "No," she said. Beckett looked at her. "He didn't commit a crime, Sergeant Major. He was a loud kid who guessed wrong about a stranger and was too proud to stop when he was warned." She turned her wrist over, an absent motion, the ink catching the light. "I've buried better men than he'll ever have to be. I'm not going to end him over the worst hour of his life." A pause. "He's mine now. I'll take him." If you have ever been underestimated by someone who never bothered to find out who you were and chosen to teach instead of destroy, you already understand her. That choice, that exact choice, is what this channel is about. If it means something to you, subscribe to Honor Tales and stay for the part that matters most. She took him, and she did not go easy. Over the 2 weeks of final phase, Gunnery Sergeant Reyes ran Cole Maddox harder than she ran anyone, and more fairly than anyone had ever run him. She gave him no special punishment and no special mercy. She held him to the standard, exactly the standard, and the standard turned out to be a far heavier thing than the swagger he had been carrying in its place. He learned what it felt like to be measured by someone who could not be impressed by volume, who saw the work or did not, who handed out respect the way she handed out everything, only when it had actually been earned. And once, in the second week, late, after the others had gone to their bunks, she told him about the wrist. Privately. No audience, which she knew he would understand, was the point. She told him about a contested district and an open fire lane and 40 minutes. She told him about a boy named Hector Marin who had shown her pictures of his sister's kids and who had been alive when she dragged him in and was not alive when the bird lifted off, and about the date on her wrist, which was not the date of any medal, but the date her friend died. Maddox listened. He did not say much. There was not much to say that would not have been small. But somewhere in the listening, the last of the 19-year-old who had owned the gym went quiet, maybe for good, and what was left underneath was a younger, truer thing that had been waiting all along for someone to take seriously enough to break and rebuild. She did not tell him the story to punish him. That was the part he understood last, and the part that changed him most. She told him because he had laughed at the ink, and a person who laughs at a thing usually does so because no one has ever shown him what is inside it. So she showed him. She opened the worst day of her life to a recruit who had wronged her, not as a weapon, but as a gift, because she had decided that the most useful thing she could do with Cole Maddox was not end him, but turn him into the kind of Marine who would never again look at a quiet stranger and see a category instead of a person. It was a harder thing to do than charging him. It cost her more. And she did it anyway, every day, for 2 weeks, which was its own kind of valor, the kind no one pins a medal on. Whitlock got his own small redemption. He had been the first to tell Maddox to stop, and at graduation he was the first person Maddox apologized to before anyone made him, on his own, which was the surest sign that something had actually changed. The change in Maddox was not magic, it was not a movie, but it was real, and it was visible, and on graduation morning it showed. She was in the gym again, before dawn, the same platform, the same quiet. He came in early, found her there, and this time he did not mock, and he did not perform. He walked over, and without being asked, he loaded her plates, the way a younger Marine loads weight for a senior one, a small act of service that said everything words could not. "Morning, Gunnery Sergeant," he said. She nodded. "Maddox." That was all. It was enough. The room he had tried to own was hers now, fully and finally, and he had made his peace with that. And there was something in him, standing there in the blue dawn light, that looked almost like the beginning of a Marine. He racked the last plate and left her to her work. And then she was alone. Rhea stood at the platform in the empty gym, the lights humming, the high windows going gold now instead of blue. She turned her left hand over and looked at the inside of her wrist, at the eagle and the globe and the anchor worn down to their essentials, at the thin dagger, at the date. She traced it once with her thumb, the way she always did, the way she would for the rest of her life. The gym was quiet around her, the good quiet now, the quiet she had come in 2 days early to find. In a few hours there would be families in the stands and dress blues in the sun, and 100 new Marines marching across the parade deck into whatever the world had waiting for them. Maddox among them, changed, carrying a morning he would never forget into a career she would never see the end of. That was the work, not the medal in the drawer, not the crossings. The work was the boys. It always had been. You stood in front of the certain ones, and you broke their certainty open as gently as it could be broken, and you poured into the space where it had been everything you knew about what this actually cost, and you hoped some of it took. Most of the time, you never found out. You just kept standing there, morning after morning, in gym after gym, doing it again. And she said the name out loud, quietly, the way she only ever said it when no one was there to hear, because some debts are not paid by medals, or by years, or by the respect of strangers in a gym at dawn. Some debts you simply carry, every day, on the inside of your wrist, where you will see them every time you turn your hand to the light. The corner had not fallen. But she had never stopped carrying the boy who had. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.